Benin City, Benin in Nigeria, was once a great empire, one of the oldest empires in Africa and probably in the world. An empire known for its technology, for its arts, its carvings. So many of the carvings from Benin are scattered in museums, especially in England. Benin was known for warriors, for its richness. They even had banks in the days of old. Over 2,000 years before the British came into Nigeria, Benin was already doing business with the Portuguese. But what is left of Benin today? What is Benin known for today? Female prostitution. 90% of the prostitutes from Nigeria that are out there in diaspora come from Benin. Mafia and fraud. The Black Axe was a fraternity that originated in the University of Benin. Later it went off campus. Members now are not undergraduates again. But the Black Axe is known all over the world for its mafia and fraud. One of the most brutal mafia confraternity gangs in the world, having members in all countries. Most countries in the world are becoming aware of just how organized and effective this gang is. And a third issue stemming out of Benin is the centro boys, otherwise known as puree boys. These are young boys that live off the women that are prostituting themselves in the diaspora. These boys have a very decisive role they play in this international prostitution, and I'm going to do an extra video about it. But in this video, I'd really like to focus on these menaces coming out of Benin. How can it be that a great empire has ended up this way? Now, I know that some people from Benin, Edo State, are going to feel like cutting off my head. But don't cut off my head. Just listen to this video and try and reason with me if what I'm saying here is true or false. So before I go on, please let me welcome you all back on my channel. Thank you so much for coming back here. On this channel, I try to talk about topics that are relevant to people, not just in diaspora, but everywhere. For those of you who don't really know too much about Benin history, let me just do a brief run through it. The people of Benin started from one father, Idu, and some people actually believe he came from the skies. However, a family grew into little settlements, villages, and towns. So what they did was to set up a kind of committee where each little village would send one representative. And this community was called Edionwere. So from every little village, somebody goes there to represent them. And the eldest of them would be their ruler. Now, because the eldest was very old and couldn't really cope, he would appoint an Ikaiko. So this was like a young man that would do the administrative work. Now, around 40 BCE, Igodo, who was the Ikaiko, initiated a coup and called himself an Ogiso. He claimed to be a direct descendant from Idu, and so to say, a ruler from the sky. And Benin had 31 Ogisos, but the 31st one was very weak, and he couldn't really rule them. At that point, they were not called Benin, but they were called Igodomigo. So he couldn't rule them and was sent into exile. And they set up an administrator to rule them. But this administrator wanted his son to take over from him. But the people of Igodomigo were angry because they said that rulership was meant to be by succession. So they went to look for the son of the last Ogisu that had been sent in exile, who was now in Ife. And he had already become a king where he was, Oduduwa. So he refused to come back to rule the people. That is the tale anyway, because the Yorubas claim that they sent a king to Benin, but Benin kind of claimed they went to take back their king. But however, Oduduwa refused, he couldn't go, and agreed to send his son. Now his son Oranmiyam, when he got there, he couldn't really rule the people because he said the people were so angry, there was so much conspiracy and wickedness among the people, and he didn't know how to handle them. And he changed the name to Ile Ibenu, meaning land of vexation. So he couldn't handle them and left his own son to grow up there, guided in the palace to learn the ways of the people. So it was eventually his son that became the first real Oba of the Benin people. And they went on to have many Obas. And they grew and grew. There were good times and bad times. But they had banks. They had so much art, music. They built castles. They had big markets. Large, great armies. They could raise up armies of thousands of people. It was really a gigantic empire until around the time when the British came. When the British came, it was the beginning of the disaster. The British were trying to take over the rule of all the areas around there. But the Benin Empire was very proud. They had been doing business with the Portuguese, so they didn't really want to be under control of the British. Now, the British claimed that they sent an army caravan to go and meet the Oba, that the caravan was unarmed. But some people tend to say that the caravan was armed. Whatever, the Oba's men, the chiefs of the Obas, planned and went and hijacked that caravan and killed the British, leaving two who ran away. They were able to escape. This now made the British to have a real excuse to invade Benin. And they went in their full force. They destroyed the city. They stole all the artworks. They damaged everything. This happened in 1897 and was called the Punitive Expedition. Punitive means like punishment. So that was how Benin was destroyed. The Oba they had then, you have to imagine at that time, the Oba's feet never used to touch the ground. They humiliated him. They made him rub his head in the ground 3 times. Humiliated him and sent him on exile to Calabar, which is a city in Nigeria. Eventually, after about 13 years, I believe it was 13 years, they installed his son, the son of the exiled Oba, as the Oba of Benin. But he had to swear allegiance to the crown. So this is kind of the story of Benin City, a great and massive empire. Now, during this period, when the British took over there and destroyed everything. A lot of things changed in Benin. Before that, the women were very loyal to their husbands. They belonged to their husbands. They would give everything for their husbands. Just to give an example of how far and loyal and dedicated Benin women were to their husbands is the story of Queen Eden, who was married to the 26th Oba of Benin. This Oba was so hard-hearted and wicked. So at a stage, everybody abandoned him. His palace was empty. The workers, the chiefs, everybody ran away, leaving him. But his wife Eden stayed with him. And when she consulted the oracle said a human sacrifice has to be made to restore the Oba's power. And Queen Eden offered her own life. And she allowed herself to be sacrificed for the Oba to get back his greatness. And when she was sacrificed, the Oba got back his greatness and power. And she only made one condition for this human sacrifice. She said her grave should be kept clean and nobody should walk on the grave. Her grave is at the Oba market in Benin. So that's how Benin women were, loyal, faithful. In fact, they used to take oaths. Being unfaithful or going astray, prostitution, these things did not exist there. But when the white man came and everything started falling apart, there were now new lifestyles, divorces, and women were now without husbands. Polygamy was not working as good as it had. And some of these women were now without men, and they were not being taken care of. The first prostitutes in Benin actually came from Nsukka to settle in Benin. And it was from them that Benin women learned, and some of them now started prostituting themselves. But despite this fact, despite people trying to blame this punitive expedition for having broken down everything, broken down the system, then after independence, the poverty, the problems that came in Nigeria, people want to blame the problems in Benin society on all that. But we have to remember that all these things happened all over Nigeria. But how come that problem is so much in Benin? How come there's so much prostitution? Some people have brought the theory that Benin women used to deal in gold, so they started going to Italy because Italy has good gold, and then they saw the market for prostitution there. That's also a theory. But is that a reason why there can be so much problems coming from one city? What I really believe is that there is a cause or some causes resting on that land. And I'm going to explain why. In 2018, I think it was 2018, the Oba of Benin came out with his chief to break all the curses being placed on prostitutes. For those that don't know, these women being trafficked to Europe and other countries for prostitution, before they leave Nigeria, they are made to take an oath by a native doctor, where maybe their pubic hair will be taking their fingernails, and they will swear to work and pay back all the money. If not, something should happen to them or their families. Now the Oba came out to break all those oaths. No native doctor is allowed to make a woman swear such an oath again. And any woman that took such an oath, that oath is not binding on her. But I feel that that was just the tip of the iceberg. For them to come out and make such an oath, they know that there's something even more inside Benin. Some secrets and tragedies that are not being talked about. The Oba that came called Benin the city of vexation. The graves of the Obas, one was dug up with over 40 human beings in it. The city has been called the city of blood. At a stage, to maintain their powers, these Obas and Ogisos were making a lot of human sacrifice. A lot of sacrifice was being made. Even if you look at the succession to the throne, very often it comes up that one brother killed the other to take the throne. Go into the history. Even there was one Oba whose mother was a Motan. His brother took the throne wrongfully from him. He went back to kill his brother and take the throne. There is another one that when the senior brother died, the junior one was sent to go and bring the older brother. On the way back, he killed the brother and the mother and lied, told the people he died a natural death. He was sent into exile. At the end of the day, when they couldn't get a replacement, they brought him back to become the Oba. So Benin has a lot of stories, a lot of innocent blood that was shed. Since there's no logical explanation to why all these problems are coming out of Benin, perhaps it's time for the youths to ask their elders a few questions. Why is it that so many of them are being rendered useless? Why is it that it is Benin people selling their own people into slavery prostitution? In the olden days, Benin was not dealing in slaves per se. They didn't need that money from the slave trades. They were a wealthy empire. Why is it now that it is Benin people selling themselves into slavery, treating themselves inhumanly, exploiting themselves to such a level that it is of international concern, internationally known all over the world? Since there can be no logical explanation to it, I think it's time as Africans to look deeper, because there is an African proverb that says, if you don't know what killed your father, if you don't ask what killed your father, the same thing will kill you. So, for the youths of Edo, Benin, try and find out where this is coming from. There may be a kind of generational curse, a curse on that land. Innocent blood that has to be appeased. And the land has to be cleansed so that peace can come back there. The Oba and the chiefs, the elders of the land, they know the truth. So they have to come out and do that cleansing so that peace can return back to that city.